Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this Thursday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting tonight's broadcast. Let's see, helps if I turn the clicker on. We've got a high wind warning out for this evening here for the western coastal areas. Actually, it's right for Cape Lisburne. Southwest winds gusting today 65 to 75 miles an hour. In fact, one peak gust this afternoon at Cape Lisburne of 76 miles an hour. And that'll continue this evening and gradually diminish throughout the night. And then a winter weather advisory along the eastern Arctic coast. There's some gale force westerly winds there, and that'll produce some snow and blowing snow. And that'll reduce visibilities to a half mile or less at times. And then a high wind warning out also for the greater Juneau area for tonight and tomorrow for northeast winds gusting over 60 miles per hour. On the satellite today, big area high pressure here over western Alaska. Clockwise flow pulling some clouds down to the most of it sliding into Canada, some coming southward here through the eastern interior. A lot of clear skies along the southeast coast, Gulf of Alaska, on down toward Kodiak Island and into Bristol Bay. Some clouds coming up from the southeast, bringing a little bit of moisture to the Alaska Peninsula. But rainfall amounts were quite light, and then kind of a break here. Another boundary bringing some moisture in, mostly toward Atka, and then off to the northwest. That leaves St. Paul in the dry zone there. And of course, dry conditions here all across the western central interior, right out to the Bering Sea, and then the front out to the west there, beginning to affect the Shimei and Attu area, with most of the moisture there pushing on off to the north and northwest, but the whole pattern gradually shifting eastward. And you can see on the chart today, two strong high pressure centers, 1,047 millibars here, one near Eagle, another one back to the west a ways there, but dominating all of interior Alaska. So on the north side, we've got that westerly flow, the strong southwest winds at Cape Lisburne, and then gusting to about 40 miles an hour at times over toward Point Lay, and just some passing areas of flurries and fog getting caught up in that wind. A little more extensive over here with that trough, and also that's where the winter weather advisory is out for. And then gradient here over the northern panhandle, not as tight as it could be, but still enough for the high wind warning there in the Juneau-Douglas area for tonight and tomorrow for those wind gusts up to or exceeding 60 miles per hour. It'll be pretty windy, pretty breezy here down the southeast coast, lighter though on down toward Dixon Entrance. And then the easterly flow here on the south side of the high, picking up some moisture off the Pacific and sliding that on into the Alaska Peninsula, some periods of light rain and snow across those areas. And the eastern Aleutians, same pattern here with that trough farther to the west, and then the next front out approaching the western Aleutians tonight, edges its way eastward here, gale force winds along with that, and then the old boundary here keeps a chance of rain or snow there for the Adak-Atka area. Of course, amounts will be light, and some of this moisture now that was affecting the peninsula today and the eastern Aleutians, I'll slide up and bring a chance of some mixed precipitation, which will either be in the form of rain or snow there to the Herbeloff Islands. But again, amounts will be quite light and kind of a pickup in the winds there, but not too bad. And then still high pressure, although coming down to about 1,040 millibars by tomorrow morning, really just entrenched over the area and holding. You can see the less gradient conditions now along the western Arctic coast up here, so winds will be coming down Actually later this evening, after midnight, dropping off considerably. Still pretty breezy though on the east side with some skiffs of snow still catching the Kaktovik Barter Island area. And so the winter weather advisory out through tonight, and the high here, gradient down the Panhandle, pretty breezy conditions, windiest Juneau and Douglas there. And some of the marine areas could see gusts, I think we're in, up to about 70 knots in the channeled areas. And for Friday, after, forgot to mention, storm warning here for kind of the northern portion of the southeast coast, mainly this evening. That'll come down, just some gales tomorrow, and definitely through Lynn Canal for both Friday and Saturday, gale force northerlies. Pretty windy now, kind of more of a gradient here over the southern southeast coast, so the winds will increase. Dry conditions, clear skies, temperatures on the chilly side, all the way up into Lynn Canal. Dry conditions, clear VFR, North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound. And after some IFR tonight over the interior and areas there, mostly clear skies, still some variable clouds with definitely dry conditions, maybe a few flurries around the Northway area, maybe as far west as Tok, but nothing significant there. Less in the way of flurries on the eastern Arctic coast, and winds still brisk, strongest here on the east side, but much lighter back to the west. Bering Sea, southeast flow, east-southeast flow here, bringing some moisture, nothing organized there, so it'll be really hit and miss, just a lot of clouds and light precipitation into the Pribilofs, mostly in the form of liquid type down at sea level there for the Alaska Peninsula, but really nothing expected. And then the front out there to the west kind of weakening with some rain over the west central Aleutian areas, and that's about it, just 3,040 millibar highs here right over the interior areas. And then for Saturday, those highs kind of shift off to the east here. One develops there south of Kodiak Island. Another one takes hold over the Russian Far East. So we're in a really light wind condition, dry, upper level ridge holding pretty well, but not much going on at the surface. So probably some areas of low clouds and fog developing here in the favored areas. Eastern Arctic coast, that's the best chance of seeing some flurry conditions as well as clouds, but those winds will be down. Still be breeziest there toward Kaktovik, demarcation point, but nothing significant at all. And it looks like the winds here starting to edge downward for the southeast coast. Won't be as strong on Saturday as they will be tomorrow, but still breezy conditions, temperatures on the chilly side, but sunshine, a lot of sunshine during the daytime and afternoon hours, and kind of chilly at night. And the same pattern here over the Bering Sea down to the Aleutians. East to southeast flow, maybe becoming a little more easterly here for the Pribilofs on up in toward St. Matthew Island, but pretty good gradient there, so quite windy conditions from about probably Nikolsky, get into the gales here west of Nikolsky to about Adak and Atka, and then gradually dropping off to the west, next to becoming a little more northeasterly and lighter out towards Shimianatu. And the best chance of some rain will be from roughly Adak onto the west, so it looks like a real dry start to the weekend for just about all of Alaska. And for the temperatures this afternoon, not too bad here. Mid-30s, both at Juneau and up at Skagway, 43 Sitka, and upper 30s across the southern areas with Kewalk at 37, Annette 38 degrees this afternoon, Wrangell 34, Petersburg up to 38, 33 back to the west here at Cordova, and a 29 recorded both at Whittier and Seward, 22 in Kenai, 10 degrees warmer at Homer, up to 40 Kodiak this afternoon, and about the same at AKwx. So Sitna Valley temperatures range from 22 degrees at Wasilla to 26 at Talkeetna, while Palmer had 18, 21 at Gunsight, down to 8 degrees there at Gulkana, while McCarthy 14, -6 at Northway, 5 above at Delta. Fairbanks this afternoon, International Airport -2, 12 above over at Tanana, and Eagle 5 below 0, back above 0 there at Fort Yukon, barely with 1 above, -8 Arctic Village, 7 above over at Anatuvik. Bettles had 18 degrees this afternoon. Up on the North Slope, pretty mild, 26 at Umiat Airfield, 21 at Alpine, and a 27 over Kaktovik, about the same upper 20s here on the western coast, 18 Point Hope, 20 degrees in Kivalina. let's see, that's Kotzebue with 16, almost called it Ambler, and 21 at Deering, while Nome had 23, 21 also there at Wales, and 12 at Caltag with -1 there at McGrath, but much milder on down the river valleys there. It's near 20 by the time you get out the coastline. Bethel 11 above. Otherwise, Savunga at 26, warming to 35 southward there to St. Paul Island, 32 at Cape Newenham, lower 30s here up over northeast Bristol Bay, upper 30s, mid 2 there for the Alaska Peninsula, 38 Unalaska, Nikolsky, 39 Adak, and 37 for Shemya. On to the lows for tonight. Not much different than what we've seen, anywhere from 0 to 15 below. Coldest here over the eastern interior, especially toward the border, Yukon Flats, and near or a little above 0 back to the west, although areas of the Kuskokwim Valley dropping maybe 0 to 10 below, and 8 degrees down to Dillingham with King Salmon forecasting a low of 11. South central Alaska, anywhere from 0 to maybe 10 above or 15, and then the North Gulf Coast, maybe some areas holding in the mid-20s. Kodiak 26. Lows mostly in the lower to mid-20s to the southeast coast. Some areas dropping into the teens. In the wind-sheltered areas, the windiest conditions keeping the temperatures up. Mid-30s for the Aleutians. Highs for tomorrow, mostly above 0 here, even in the eastern interior, although the Yukon Flats and where the purple areas there along the east side staying a shade below 0. Otherwise, teens, maybe lower 20s again, the North Slope. Arctic coast, lower 20s, Seward Peninsula and eastern Norton Sound with temperatures 25 to 30, south central Alaska, and mid-30s Kodiak Island, 35 to 40 for the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians, and upper 30s to lower 40s out to the west. And should be generally a below freezing kind of day here for the Panhandle, but some areas like Sitka rising into the mid-30s. And then for flying weather, again, some IFR here over the interior where the low stuff is, areas of fog. Eastern Arctic coast there due to the winter weather advisory, lingering flurries, blowing snow gusty winds, and mostly off the coast, maybe catching Point Lay, but nothing too bad here. VFR right down the coastline to Bristol Bay, picking up some marginal to isolated IFR out over the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. Good VFR for the southeast coast. And that holds through tomorrow afternoon as well here. Just some lingering up there on the eastern Arctic coast, but VFR right out until you hit Nunivak Island, marginal for Kodiak, and a narrow band of possible IFR there. Looks like it won't even reach Nikolsky. Otherwise, just areas of marginal VFR out to the west toward the Komodorskis. Passes, of course, Anatuvik, Adigan, all the passes will be VFR tomorrow. Brooks Range, the Alaska Range, Lake Clark, and Merrill looking good. Rainy VFR, windy, same forecast. Ceilings visibility is unlimited for Isabel, Mentasta, and Tanita, and even Portage. With Chilkoot and White, good VFR. Freezing levels, big high pressure area aloft here, 4,000 to 6,000 feet, all the way up to the Arctic coast there. And then kind of a 2,000 to 4,000 foot zone right down across the Kenai Peninsula. Surface right out along the central and southern southeast coast with that cold outflow from Canada, and then back up to St. Matthew Island. Looking at the icing threat, of course, big high pressure means no icing anywhere here over the interior or the Panhandle. Kodiak Island, Gulf of Alaska, clear. May hit some areas here with those two bands of moisture there for the mostly the Atka area, and then from Amchitka Island over to Shemya. And again, massive area, upper level high here with the high freezing levels associated with it. So the main jet way back to the west there, cutting across the far western Aleutians into the Russian Far East, far to the north, dropping southward here, but northeast winds pretty strong, supporting the stronger winds there for the Panhandle, about 120 knots. Closer in, lower elevation, 9,000 feet, kind of a light easterly, east-northeasterly flow here, maybe up to 15 to 20 knots right through this part of the state, dropping back to variable there with a high center. Westerlies 25, central Arctic coast, up to 55 there on the extreme east side, and then northeast 10 to 20, and then much windier conditions out here to the west in the Bering Sea, 50 knots, central Aleutians, northwestward there, dropping off toward the Pribilofs, 25 knots there, Nunivak Island to St. Matthew Island, and the southeast coast, again, those strong north to northeast, 35 to 50 knots across the area. 9,000-foot winds, call it 20 to 45 at this level for the zone there, but about the same in direction here. Strong high pressure right up over the Kobuk Valley. Really light winds here on the south side for 3,000 feet, even into the Gulf of Alaska, Kodiak Island. Not looking at a lot of wind at all. And the stronger winds now are just off the coast, just catching the east side there. Otherwise, pretty light conditions now, as you can see, even back toward Cape Lisburne and Point Hope, as well as the northwest coast. And for turbulence, occasional moderate chop below 4,000 feet from Unalaska all the way out to Kiska Island, lighter towards Shimia, and just some light to isolated moderate chop possible there for the central and western Alaska Peninsula. Maybe a little bumpy there for the Pribilofs, nothing significant, all the way up into the Bering Strait, smooth over all of the mainland. And then with those northeast winds, mechanical turbulence, occasionally moderate, possibly severe for smaller aircraft, but go with moderate mostly there below 4,000 feet. And after Stargazer, I'll return to look at the ice edge in the marine forecasts.
Constellations everywhere.
Welcome to Stargazers. I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida.
And I'm Dehne Regis, astronomer from the Cincinnati Observatory.
Hey Dean, we have something special to talk about this week.
What would that be? Another planetary close encounter, or perhaps an eclipse?
Well, none of those actually. A viewer of our show visited my planetarium a while back, and they asked me this question: where did all these constellations come from? I thought that would be a great theme for this week's show.
You're absolutely right. We talk about constellations every week, but where did they all come from and who invented them?
Let's show you. For thousands of years, our ancestors have looked up at the night sky and wondered what it all was. Even as recently as 100 years ago, before the proliferation of streetlights, if you went outside on a clear moonless night, you could see thousands of stars right from your backyard.
Without a scientific understanding of what the stars actually were, many ancient cultures thought the stars were divine. Each star was considered a god, fixed in position relative to the others, appearing to rise in the east and set in the west night after night.
Imagine how magical, mysterious, and awesome the heavens must have seemed to our ancestors. As a person went from youth to old age, they would see the same stars in the same locations year after year, the same at age 5 as at age 50. And the sky seemed so high above them that the stars were unreachable, as if they were attached to the inside of a large crystalline sphere with us at the center.
And this sphere would appear to rotate around the Earth again, with us at the center, making the stars appear to rise in the east and set in the west. This repetitive motion of the stars was very predictable, so many ancient people used the night sky as a primitive clock.
That's right, because not only was the daily motion of the stars repetitive, but over the course of a year, the stars you could see would gradually change. However, 365 days later, the same stars you saw a year ago would reappear in the same place. So if you look up at the stars after sunset on your birthday, you'll see the same stars in the same place every birthday for as long as you live. The human brain likes to make order out of chaos. Although the distribution of the stars in the night sky is random, your brain immediately wants to make patterns out of the brightest stars. So, as our ancestors spent their evenings gazing at the stars, they would play a game of celestial connect-the-dots, making patterns, both big and small, that represented objects, animals, or people. We call these patterns constellations.
There are 88 officially recognized constellations in modern astronomy. Which constellations you can see is dependent on where on the Earth you're observing. For example, people who live in Australia can see some of the same stars that we can see from North America, but not all of them, and vice versa. Australians can see the Southern Cross, but only a few of us in North America can. North Americans can see Ursa Major, the Great Bear, but New Zealanders cannot. The only places on Earth where you can actually see all 88 constellations is at the equator.
So, as people around the world played connect the dots with the stars, they would create fanciful stories about each of the constellations they created. Many of these stories were used to pass down cultural values of morality or tell stories about love, courage, or honor.
Many of the stories of these constellations were handed down from generation to generation by word of mouth. Sadly, because we have so many streetlights today, many of the fainter stars are invisible from where most people live. Therefore, we have gotten out of the habit of creating new stories and new star patterns.
So, the next time you go out camping, do as Jack Horkheimer often said, make the stars your own. Who knows, you might be the first person to create the constellation of the smartphone. Keep looking up.
Ice analysis today, of course, with the southerly winds out here, kind of pulling off the coast or becoming thinner due to the south to north flow there, like along the north side of the Seward Peninsula and some other areas down here. And of course, pulling back from St. Matthew Island from what it was earlier in the week. But the wind's going to be lightening up, so probably not going to be a lot of additional changes out there after about tomorrow on. Anyway, for the marine forecast, gale force winds, minimum gales on the south coast, basically all out of the northeast, to 45 knots here in the north. Seas running 12 to 14 feet, of course much higher gusts through the channeled areas. North, 45 knots, actually starting out as a storm, I believe there for northern Lynn Canal, coming down to 40 knots in the afternoon. So I took the average. Minimum gales for Stevens Passage and small craft advisories for Clarence Strait. Those become more northerly, but hold on to 25 knots for Clarence Strait, gradually increasing to 30, and then 40 knots for northern Lynn Canal, higher gusts again. And now just minimum gales on the south coast out of the northeast, diminishing down to 25 knots and becoming more northerly there in the northern zone. The seas also diminishing or subsiding down to 6 to 11 feet. Prince William Sound, north or northeast, either way, it's going to be pretty light, 10 knots, 3-foot seas or less. Light variable winds, northern Cook Inlet become north of 20. South of the Forelands, northwest or Camashack Bay, 25 knots. That's about the windiest condition in these zones here for tomorrow for the Barren Islands, otherwise west-northwest for Kodiak Island. And then on Saturday, northwest 20, Camashack Bay, right across the Barrens. Westerlies 20, blowing across Kodiak Island. Really light winds here for the North Gulf Coast, north to northwest, 10 to 15 knots. Seas you can see just 4 to 5 feet, maybe up to 7 there for Kodiak. No change for Prince William Sound or Cook Inlet at all. And for Bristol Bay, Friday, northeast 20, east winds 25 knots to the Alaska Peninsula. Seas 6 feet on the north side, Pacific side 13 feet, east 15 there from Castle Cape to Sitkinak. And those become northwest on Saturday, but still 15 knots. And then southeast winds for the peninsula turn easterly here on the Bering Sea side, northeast 15 for Bristol Bay with slight seas. And for the Aleutians, Fox Islands, east-southeast, small craft advisories there, 25 knots, picking up to 30 knots from just west of Nikolsky, and get into some gale force conditions here, especially on the north side of Adak and Atka, with seas 15 to 19 feet. Adak west, southeast, 40 knots, seas 18 to 21 feet. For Saturday, less wind, especially out here in the far western zone, becoming northeast, dropping off to 20, small craft advisories. Good gales continue. Adak and Atka east 40 to 45 knots, 35 to 40 knots as you head toward Nikolsky. And for Unalaska Island, southeast 30 knots, seas running 10 to 15 feet. For the southwest coast, east winds 20 knots here from Kuskokwim Bay right up to Cape Romanzoff, 30 knots there for St. Matthew Island. Southeast 25 for the Pribilofs, and not too bad down to 20 knots for for St. Matthew Island, St. Lawrence Island. And then that drops even further the next day, Saturday, 15 knots, and pretty uniform wind pattern here, all out of the east. Rather light though, again 15 knots, right on down to Kuskokwim Bay, across Nunivak Island. Pribilofs east at 25, holding on to a little stronger winds here, St. Matthew Island, especially west of the island there in the western part of the zone, where seas will be as high as 14 feet. Arctic coast gales tomorrow, tonight and tomorrow, east side there, 35 knots, diminishing to 25, down to 20 on the central coast. Back to the brisk wind advisories here for the western coast, on down to Cape Thompson. South of the Cape Thompson, light winds out of the east, only 15. And those become even lighter on Saturday, 5 to 10 knots from a southwest direction, right on up to the central coast. They become westerly, and then gradually increase a little bit, but really coming down considerably here, especially over toward Demarcation Point, down to 15 knots after the gales for tomorrow. Tonight, strong high pressure covering interior Alaska, a little bit of moisture catching the eastern Arctic coast. Winter weather advisory out there for tonight for blowing snow, gusts of 40 miles an hour, or 40 to 50 miles an hour, and lighter conditions, diminishing wind. High wind warning ends for the Cape Lisburne area later this evening. Chance of some moisture slipping on up into the Pribilofs there on the southeast wind flow, extending back down to the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, and then the high wind warning out for the Juneau-Douglas area, and another location there for wind gusts to exceed 60 miles per hour. And it looks pretty windy actually all the way down until you get toward Dixon Entrance. Dry conditions, not much in the way of even clouds, and then a couple of bands of moisture and a front out to the west. Really not doing much. This front stalled out back here to the west. Southeast flow covering the Bering Sea with some clouds and maybe a little light moisture. Really, again, hit and miss, probably more miss than hit. And then the Alaska Peninsula, lighter winds. No change for the interior tomorrow. Again tonight, low clouds and fog over areas of interior Alaska. Otherwise, all there is to mention, maybe some flurries here for the Wrangell Mountains, possibly Northway, eastern Arctic coast as well. And then for Saturday, no change. Have a great evening.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
If you're interested in serving on your local Federal Subsistence Regional Advisory Council, the deadline to apply is Friday, February 3rd. Email subsistence@fws.gov for more information.